It's the first week of December, and that means, as usual, almost every major Best Albums of the Year list is officially out. I'm Dave, I'm here with Andrew, and on today's episode of BV Weekly, we'll be going through 5 surprises and takeaways from the lists that we've looked at so far. It's been like super overwhelming this week, actually, because for like every year, not Brooklyn Vegan's year-end list, that's coming, stay tuned, but like almost every major year-end list is out as usual first week of December, and then like simultaneously Apple Replay and Spotify Wrapped dropped, so like everybody is sharing their personal, what they listen to, or maybe less people are sharing it than usual. A lot more Apple than usual this year, but yeah, what'd you have on your, what'd you listen to a lot of?
Well, my top 2 songs of the year were both by Greg Freeman, Gallic Shrug and Curtain, and then my album and artist was Turnstile. It's the new Turnstile album, Never Enough, and they were my most played artist. What about you?
I never would have guessed that.
Yeah, surprising for me, right?
Yeah, mine was pretty random actually, but I was like Clips and Geese were heavy in my most listened to, which yeah, makes sense. Mostly, first of all, my age was 17 because I listened to, quote, so much new stuff, but then there was like a few old things that I listened to so much that it kind of like dominated the short list of mosts. So yeah, what was your age?
Damn, my age was 76.
Oh yeah, no.
But that's also because I had a very big spiritual jazz phase this year. My top 5 artists include Alice Coltrane and Pharoah Sanders separately. The other 3 are Turnstile, Greg Freeman, and Deftones. So yeah, I guess we've got quite the listening age gap.
Charlie XCX's most listened to artist was Velvet Underground. She also had an old age.
Yeah, it's yeah. Definitely I feel like that's this year's like dumb edition. But,
yeah.
But I also had Clips' new album at number 5 on my 5 albums. So
oh yeah,
Clips was big for me too. I mean, obviously, as we've talked about before, but yeah.
Actually, that Ancient Death album was also all over my top songs and album, which I don't know. Like I still love that album, but I probably all of that listening it came out early in the year, and it was like the first metal obsession of my early 2025, and yeah, I did listen to it a lot, so it makes sense.
Mm-hmm. I do think it's kind of interesting because like I feel like I just had like, it's actually been really hard for me to hone in on what I think my number 1 favorite album of the year is, and I think that's because I had like multiple big phases. Like I feel like I have an album I obsessed over for like each quarter, but not one that really stood tall above the other 3 quarters.
Yeah, I mean, there's some early year ones that they have stuck with me as like top of my list, but even though I don't listen to them that often now, I just remember that I think that about them, and I still agree with myself, if that makes any sense. But yeah,
no, I mean it does, because a year is it's so short, but also so long. Like, well, yeah, it's really hard to evaluate an album you've had in your rotation or your mind or whatever for 11 months compared to one you've had for a month or less.
Very true.
Especially with the year lists coming out. Like, again, we like to wait a little bit for ours, which helps. But with lists coming out the first week of December, I mean, there were pretty significant amount of records coming out up until Thanksgiving. So like, you have to somehow evaluate an album that you've maybe had a week or 2 with to one that you've had almost a year with.
Yeah, and we'll actually get into that a bunch more very soon. But first, also just real quick, the Bonnaroo lineup came out.
Speaking of Turnstile, headliner status.
Yes, along with the Strokes on Friday. The Friday is pretty good.
Yeah, Friday, I mean, Bonnaroo. Sorry, go ahead.
No, Geese, Wednesday, Turnstile, Strokes, Wet Leg, all on the same day.
Yeah, and Blood Orange, Hot Mulligan, the Chats, Lambrini Girls. Like, that's a day. Like, I
Yeah,
mean, Bonnaroo
new-
being a camping festival, I've actually never been. Have you ever been to Bonnaroo?
No, actually.
Look at that. Well, you know, it's a lot. I mean, I have friends who have gone, and like, it's a lot from what I understand. And you know, fingers crossed, because they struggle with weather and the environment and the time of year that they have it. But if that was like one day of a festival I could like get to by car or train or something, I would. That's a stacked day. I'd do that.
Yes.
Very up my
I get it.
alley. But also, I
Fridays.
mean, also clips are on like one of the other 2 days, so it
No,
does.
I know,
There's a
but
lot of
it's
other
like,
stuff, but
at that point, I'm like, I've seen clips. I'll see them at their own show. Because there's bands I like on the other 2 days, but probably not enough to get me personally to those other 2 days. And then there's hilariously Tsunami on Saturday at the bottom of the lineup, which, you know, they're still got to shove a random hardcore band on there, and not even on the Turnstile day. Come on.
amazing. But there are a few other punk bands. I mean, it's interesting because I think Turnover or Day 3, and obviously
Yeah,
they
but who's
toured
going?
with what? Go ahead.
I thought that was weird too. I mean, listen, Turnover sold out 2 nights at Brooklyn Paramount when they just toured the album, whatever, like very quickly. Those tickets were in high demand.
Could have
Are
been 3 nights.
Are any of those people at Bonnaroo on the day with whatever other bands are playing?
I think so, because I think Turnover have successfully become like the dream pop band that they were trying to become. Like, I was at one of those nights, and it's not just like the punk kids anymore.
Okay.
So I actually feel pretty good about Turnover being like, just on like kind of like becoming more of a festival. I'm not 100% sure how many festivals that they've been doing, but they make sense to me on one of these multi-genre fests.
I get they're worth the tickets, but here's who's on their day: Noah Kahan, Role Model, Kesha, Tedeschi Trucks, Clips, like we said, Mariah the Scientist, Modest Mouse. But again, like, yeah, Modest Mouse fans maybe, but do Modest Mouse fans even know who Turnover is?
But again, you got to consider, being a camping festival, people are going all 3 days.
Japanese
like,
Breakfast.
If you a Japanese Breakfast and Turnover probably have a lot of the same fans.
That's the one maybe. And then Fuckers are on that day, which they're billed billed surprisingly low. I bet they have a big crowd at Bonnaroo. Blonde Shell's on there. But yeah, I don't know. There's just Turnover. Yeah,
I mean, it would be especially epic if Turnover were on like the Turnstile Geese Wednesday day. But I think a lot of people would go for all 3 days. And I think having Turnover on there feels exciting, with them being kind of having this like, I mean, it's not even like a comeback or a resurgence, because they've never stopped, but they just feel bigger than ever, and they fit well with a lot of this stuff. So that one stood out as exciting to me. OCs, I don't know like how many Bonnaroo goers in the present day like realize they should definitely not miss OCs, but I love to see them on big festivals. I have seen them on a festival. I saw them at Boston Calling one year, and really cool to see them bring their kind of energy to these types of fests. If
you're going to Bonnaroo, definitely check them out. Always a great live show.
Yeah.
Yeah. So year-end lists.
Yeah.
It's like we said, first week of December, most major lists come out. Ours doesn't come out then. We always wait. Getting lists around December 1st has become a tradition over the past, however, I don't know how many years, because honestly, everyone is competing for web traffic, and you get it out earlier, then you get more page hits. I think that's kind of what it comes down to. And so December 1st has kind of become a thing. No one except Brooklyn Vegan Us wants to be like the last one to have it out. And then, but this precedent also comes from print, which is, it's not unusual that Decibel and Mojo and other actual print magazines have it out in November, because for them, the print magazines always needed to make their print deadlines, because their end of year lists appeared in December issues, which needed to be printed and sent and appear in your mailbox before, or maybe sometimes people waited for January. Either way, they had to get these things done way in advance, and then they had them done, and then the internet became more important. So then, of course, they're putting them out on the website earlier. People are just copying them out of the print magazines, to be fair sometimes. But so then, websites also have to compete, put them out earlier. Anyway, so like December 1st is a thing for most lists. So we've got, Pitchfork, NPR, or no, not NPR, sorry. I was going to say, except as of the time we're recording, we haven't seen NPR yet. NME is supposed to come out today, Friday. We haven't seen those, but like we have Pitchfork, Stereo Gum, Mojo, Rolling Stone, Consequence of Sound, Paste, and on and on. We'll reference a bunch of these throughout this episode, and we looked at them, and we came up with some observations that we're going to go through. So, one other thing I was going to say, like, people sometimes criticize publications, like, why are you putting this out before the end of the year? And the number one comeback is, well, we listened. We're publications. We get advances. We know what was coming out in December. Plus, less comes out in December, so it's a little easier to figure out. So it's like, in theory, the lists, even if they come out on December 1st, are considering December releases. Although that's not always true either. As we know, there are some major exceptions. There are surprise releases. Maybe some publications purposely leave off December and put them on the next year, but we'll get more into that later, where sometimes a 2024 list album appears on a 2025 list. So, yeah, I guess, is that enough of an intro? Do you want to get into
the first? We've got 5 sort of takeaways / surprise. No, they're not all surprises. Some of them were surprises or discoveries. Some of them are just kind of takeaways, observations, but we got 5. And the first one is that Pitchfork's #1 album of the year is by far the most obscure #1 album that I think in the existence of Pitchfork, or at least since 1999, which is like when it became the Pitchfork that it is. And that has been stirring up a lot of buzz on the social medias. And that is the album, the self-titled album from Los Tutanaka, which is the sibling duo of Alicia Crampton, who is someone that's been on a lot of Pitchfork lists over the years, usually like more specific genre lists, like in the kind of experimental or electronic realm, although they were on their 200 best albums of the 2010s list. And then their brother Joshua. This record, like last year, it's the second year in a row where Pitchfork included atop their list with an album that's not on streaming services. It's a Bandcamp exclusive for this one. Last year was Cindy Lee, which was like that, like old, like, for what website was it? It wasn't Angel Fire, but it was like one of those kinds of.
Oh, right. You could only download it. Yeah.
So, and also, like, I mean, it should be probably worth noting that these past 2 years, Pitchfork has had a different like head of editorial, which is, I guess, their third, because they had Pooja Patel for a while, and before that, obviously, it was founder Ryan Schreiber. And now it's this music critic whose name is Mono, and there's definitely been this noticeable change in that both of their #1 records of the year are these like more obscure records. But I would say Cindy Lee felt pretty classic Pitchfork. Like, that's still the same Pitchfork that gave Panda Bear album of the year. You know, like, Cindy Lee is definitely like, yes, the album wasn't as accessible literally in that, like, you know, you couldn't just listen to it on any streaming service. But other than that, I mean, we just did a Cindy Lee episode because they played those big New York shows. I mean, they were big. Like, Cindy Lee literally is on the new Panda Bear album and sang in that band Women, who are a classic Pitchfork band, and a classic just indie rock band. I mean, like, not just Pitchfork, but all the similar music publications to Pitchfork, including Brooklyn Vegan, of course, like, all big fans of Women, all big fans of Preoccupations, which is the other offshoot band from Women. But this record is this experimental electronic album that it's instrumental unless you count vocal samples. It's definitely like the most niche album that's ever topped a Pitchfork list. And so, as you would expect, people are talking about it.
Yeah. And to your point, Cindy Lee last year wasn't surprising. Cindy Lee was almost predictable. And we knew that everybody would have Cindy Lee, which, like you said, is a rock record too. This one was maybe predictable just because of the score Pitchfork had already given it, right? And it got a
9.3. And I will say, my friend asked me what I think Pitchfork's #1 is going to be, and I actually said I think it could be this record. So I feel like it was predictable in a way, in like a if you looked at their scores and took into consideration, like, they're not going to do Geese, you know, like you just kind of can feel like, I will talk more about Geese, obviously, but like that would have been the most predictable indie rock pick. And I just had this feeling of like, they're not going to go with Geese. It's probably going to be like a curveball. And so I thought it could be this. I also thought it could be that record Hexed by Aya, which I think we could talk a little bit more about in a little bit, which was number one on both The Quietus and The Wire. Which I think is also, sorry for kind of going on this tangent, but I'll throw it back to you. I think it's worth saying that like if this Los Tu Tanaka album would have topped The Quietus or The Wire's list, these lists that are more experimental and electronic based in general, that would have not surprised me at all. And it was on both of those lists. I think it was 59 on Quietus and 3 on The Wire. Yeah. So like that would have not shocked me. But on Pitchfork, it's like, you know, it's a new territory, I guess.
But it's not new, like you said, it's not new territory for them to cover Alicia Crampton, who has been for over 10 years gotten consistently high scores and appeared on genre lists and stuff, and on other publications as well. Alicia Crampton is just one of those. Like to me, it's there's this handful of experimental artists who I get reminded exist almost every year, because they fill out slots on all these lists. And like that site Tiny Mixtapes, that in the early days of Pitchfork, I used to think of Tiny Mixtapes. When Brooklyn Vegan started, it was like Tiny Mixtapes and Pitchfork were practically equal sites to me. And Tiny Mixtapes like regularly had Alicia Crampton albums on their actual end of year list, not genre list. So yeah, it's not totally out of nowhere, but like you said, it's like a whoa at number one.
Like if it was number 2, we wouldn't be having this conversation. Like, yeah. We've, you know, it's not crazy to even the score. We didn't totally have this conversation. Like it doesn't totally blow my mind that this record got in. Also, I will say like it's a fantastic album. Like let's talk about it a little bit. So again, it's the duo of Alicia and Joshua Crampton, who are siblings. Alicia handles keys, electronics, and Bolivian string and percussion instruments. Joshua handles guitar and bass. And basically it's this mix of like indigenous Andean rhythms with electronic samples and a lot of guitar work. And again, it's very experimental. It is instrumental minus vocal samples. But I'd also say like it is very catchy, and it's definitely very hypnotic. I mean, it's totally puts you in a trance. But like what I really like about it is I would say that like I'm not as up on this type of experimental and electronic music as like a lot of other people are. So like I'm certainly not claiming to be an expert, but you know, like I dabble, and a lot of times I hear stuff like this and I'm like, okay, like I respect it. It's like, but like it's not totally for me, and I don't know that I have the like enough context to like exactly hear how like this one differentiates from that one. But this kind of stood out to me right away. It's really, really, really hooks you in a way that I think this kind of music doesn't always. And it definitely stood out. It definitely sounds different than a lot of other records I've heard in this realm in this year, in the past couple of years. So
agreed. I mean, I unfortunately I did not listen to it when the reviews first came out. I probably was slightly like too lazy to figure out how to listen to it, and then I just kind of forgot. So it was the fact that it suddenly started appearing on all end of year lists was a little bit of a surprise for me personally, only because I kind of just forgot about it. And now, so just like in the past 24 hours, I admittedly just listened to it for the first time. And yeah, it was instantly great. So I kind of agree that, yeah, it stands out in that way, but I say that also without the full context of similar albums.
And I'll say like, you know, again, I think it's for Pitchfork to put it as number one is certainly like a take, I guess we can say, but also by doing so, you're bringing this attention to the album. Like I said, if this was number 2, I bet a lot more people have listened to this in the past 48 hours or whatever time between the list coming out and you hearing this episode than if it was number 2 on the list. So I think that's cool. I think it's cool to give it that attention. Like, I think, like in the past, like if you compare Pitchfork's albums of the year, there's been this viral tweet from Chart Data that's been doing that. It listed every Pitchfork album of the year from 2010 onwards, which I don't know why they stopped at 2010 instead of like addressing the 2000s. But regardless, like, Pitchfork's lists have been topped by like Kanye West, My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy, multiple Kendrick Lamar albums, Beyonce albums, SZA, Solange. Like, I mean, in the 2000s, it would be topped by like Animal Collective and Fleet Foxes and Panda Bear and Sufjan Stevens. And these records that like kind of still feel like really definitive and really representative of their eras on a really wide scale. And that is, I'm not saying that they have to do that, but I am saying that objectively, this album is not that. Like, I don't really think if you look back in 10 years, you're going to be like, oh yeah, 2025, the year of Los Tutanaka, just like 2010 was the year of My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. So they clearly decided to not do that. And again, I think like, is what it is, but it'll bring a lot more attention to the album. So that's a cool thing.
Yeah. Did you want to talk any more about kind of what you hear in the album?
I think I said enough.
Its
but
influences. Okay.
Yeah. Do you want to talk about some other unexpected number? Oh, sorry. Go ahead.
One thing, Pitchfork is not the only. You mentioned it's in the more experimental site list and it's in Pitchfork, but it may be influenced by Pitchfork. It also showed up number 2 on Paste, number 14 on Stereo Gum. So other big lists that are rock leaning websites also throwing this in there. And that kind of becomes a thing every year. If there's like this one experimental album or this one ambient album or whatever it is in kind of a genre that's not as well represented overall on these bigger lists, like that becomes the album and that starts appearing on lots of lists.
And I do think, like I kind of said, I think the other one of those this year is Aya's Hexed.
Yes.
Which you just, if nothing else, Hex. I was saying Hexed with an ED. It probably sounds the same. It's just Hex. It stands out because of its artwork. Which if you haven't seen it, just go look at it because that's all you need to do. But that was, like I said, number 1 on The Quietus and The Wire. So that's for sure. And it had also got a 9 when Pitchfork reviewed it. It came in at 22 on their list. It's also on Stereo Gum and Paste's lists. And that's like a really abrasive record with like dirty, noisy electronic, screamed vocals. That's probably like more accessible to a rock audience since you kind of mentioned like the rock thing. But yeah, those two felt like the two this year, the kind of like two like electronic experimental records that were going to kind of cross over outside of that niche. And I'm not surprised that Aya tops both The Quietus and The Wire.
Yeah. Though I should say you reminded me of a point I wanted to say by pointing out that Aya got a 9 and that Los Tutanaka, if I'm saying that right, got a 9.3.
Yeah.
3. So it was somewhat predictable they would be on the top, but then that doesn't always come true. I was very surprised to see FKA Twigs, who got a 9.1 Best New Music on Pitchfork, actually showed up at number 42 of the year on their Best of 2025 list.
That was really interesting. And this is something I feel like we like marvel at every year. I mean, we'll talk more about it, but like, foreshadowing / spoiler alert, Pitchfork's number 3 album of the year got an 8.3, which is the lowest score I think that Best New Music can be. Maybe 8.2 they'll give it to. So yeah, it's like always interesting to see like, oh, a 9 point something barely made the list and an 8.3 came in at number 3. But that's what we were kind of saying earlier in the episode of like, you need that time to sit with these records, right? Like if they made the list, if FKA Twigs put her album out in November and got a 9, it'd probably make the top 10 of the list because of recency bias.
Right.
So.
Yeah, no, for sure. And also, you don't know how these lists are always made, who was making, who was personally excited when that review first came out versus like the however many people who contributed to the end of year list.
Exactly. And we certainly don't know.
So,
but should we talk about some other unexpected number 1s?
Yes, this was not the only like, oh wow, number 1 on a list this year. So another surprising one was over in Canada on Exclaim, whose number one was a small band. It is a band. They're called Ribbon Skirt, formerly called Love Language. They're like a Canadian post-punk duo who, shout out, just played our M for Montreal showcase just like 2 weeks ago. So that was it's always good when you have a band playing your show and then 2 weeks later they're number one on someone's list. But yeah, they're like, this album is, indie rock, post-punk. It celebrates, I don't know how you say her name, Tashina Boussois is the front person of this band. It celebrates their indigenous identity. And it was made with somebody you just mentioned, Scott from the band Preoccupations, formerly known as Viet Cong, which is the project made up of ex-members of Women. Scott was not in Women, but other members of Preoccupations were, along with Cindy Lee. So, hey, we have number one connections here, like 2 degrees of separation between.
Look at that.
Last year's Pitchfork number one and this year's Exclaim number one. So yeah, that was unexpected. I did notice Ribbon Skirt was on Stereo Gum's mid-year list, but dropped off completely at the end of year lists, leaving just like, so like you've got a band like Ribbon Skirt who was on no other lists, but then number one on somebody's list.
And it's like with the internet, it feels like it barely matters where someone's from anymore, but it still kind of does, because like that a Canadian publication has a Canadian band at number one, and like we're from New York and it feels like the whole year is dominated by Geese. Like, I'm sure this stuff, like, all the UK lists, a lot of them had Pulp at number one. We barely saw Pulp on a lot of the big US lists. I think they made Rolling Stone towards the bottom or something. So that stuff does matter more than you think it does on like the day to day. But yeah, also I'll just say Exclaim's list was really cool. It had a lot of records on it that I didn't see on others. I'm glad that last week we did our kind of 10 albums to like make sure you've heard, because both Greet Death and Great Grandpa were on Exclaim's list, but I don't think I saw either one on any other list.
Well, Greet Death might have been on at least one or two other ones, but yeah, no, for sure. By the way, go back and listen to that episode last week if you haven't yet, because that's a good intro to this episode as well, where we start our year-end list talk.
I'm gonna correct myself, but the only other list Greet Death are on that we saw is Treble, and I'm using albumoftheyear.org for this. The only other list they're on that got registered on that website is Treble. So I thought we'd see him on like maybe 6 or 7 lists or maybe more.
They're on Pitchfork's song list.
But yeah.
We haven't really talked about song lists much yet.
But speaking of where artists are from,
out as well too.
Another unexpected number one came from Swedish musician Anna von Hauswolf. She topped Line of Best Fits list.
Yeah, which of course was personally exciting for me because I am a huge Anna von Hauswolf fan. I love that album, and I don't have it personally at number one, maybe, but it's the kind of artist who, when I see someone else has it at number one, I get really excited. So, and that album also has Iggy Pop and Ethel Cain on it. And if you don't know Anna, we've talked about her before, but it's like art rock, post rock, kind of neoclassical, dark wave, metal adjacent music. And I don't know, I just always think of Anna as very much my vibe.
Very, very cool record. Any others we should shout out before the next topic?
Yeah. We've said this before, but super surprising to ourselves, and also I think the entire metal world this year, was Decibel having the new Dead Guy album at number one. I think Dead Guy was on the cover of an issue of Decibel this year too, so it's not like completely out of nowhere. And Albert, who runs Decibel, I think is a huge Dead Guy fan, and this is Dead Guy are technically from New Jersey, but Decibel, Albert from Philly. I think there's, this is a long-awaited reunion album for Dead Guy, and I think that first Dead Guy album means a lot to a lot of people. They kind of like one of the people who helped invent metalcore, and I'm sure Albert was a huge fan, and I'm sure that helped push the new Dead Guy's excitement, onto number one. Possibly.
I mean, I could see a best metal of 1995 having the debut album from Dead Guy, and I'd be like, oh, that's a cool pick. but I think, and you know, no disrespect, but I was surprised that was Decibel's number one. That was not something at all that I saw coming.
Right.
I'll go on to the next topic, which is, so whenever we look at these lists, like we said this on last week's episode, that like one of my favorite parts of list season, one of the reasons that, like, you know, we're like Dave said, we have our own list coming. We're going to be talking a lot about those on future podcast episodes. But one of the reasons that it is also great and fun to look at and discuss these other lists is because you try so hard to listen to as much as you can, and you still miss things, and you always learn about stuff during year-end list season. So one album,
right, which to be fair, like most people are probably like, obviously, but
well,
yes, as people who are people who are reviewing 15 albums every single week, we're still even discovering albums on
I mean, I think, right, like, you know, my friends from other, like, you know, who don't work in music and stuff, like, they'll look at these lists and be like, I haven't heard of half of this. But
right,
but like, yeah, exactly, right, what you said. But anyway, like, one album that I had just never heard of, and then all of a sudden it was on like 5 lists, and I was like, who is this? Is Gelli Haha. And I checked it out, and I was instantly sold. So I'm excited to talk about it.
It's spelled Gelli.
Yeah.
And
so if like me, you didn't know who this was, a little bit of background. It is the alter ego of Angel Abaya, who previously released a debut album under her own name called The Bubble in 2023, which the Quietus' Claire Biddles referred to as a decent indie rock album, and which Nina Corcoran from Pitchfork on their best pop albums list wrote, "Thank God Angel Abaya got folk rock out of her system." Yeah, because this new look is for sure way more interesting. It's so the Quietus, again, called the Gelli Haha character, quote, an amalgamation of Pee Wee Herman, Marina Diamandis' Electra Heart, and 2000s Electra Clash Party Girl. That was not the only Pee Wee Herman comparison. Harry Tafoya's album review for Pitchfork mentioned Pee Wee, and also mentioned Gelli Haha's, quote, children's party on acid aesthetic, which I think, like, Pee Wee's Playhouse could probably be described as children's party on acid. She has name dropped Björk, Animal Collective, Of Montreal, Kate Bush, James Murphy's DFA parties, Michael Alex Club Kids party. Did I say his name right? Studio 54. Yep. She picked Björk's debut as her Pitchfork Perfect 10. So you kind of can, I think, from that get a little bit of a vibe of where her head is at. And yeah, I mean, it's amazing. Like, her
head is in my past.
Yeah, no, present, for sure. Also the live show, which I haven't seen because I just heard this record 3 days ago, but I watched some video, also has Pee Wee's Playhouse vibes. Because I haven't seen her, I'm going to quote Andy Steiner's review for Northern Transmission of her recent show at Nightclub 101 in New York. Andy wrote, inflatable hammers, matching red lab coats that strip down into boxers outfits, a rainbow parachute like the one you remember from gym class, a bubble machine, confetti sprinkled into plastic cups and thrown on the crowd, 3 mini trampolines. These are only a few of the props and toys featured in the live show of Dance Pop Oddball Gelli Haha. Now,
yeah, I did not even fully realize that she did all this in this live show, when I've been listening also a lot to this record in the past few days, and it's also just a really fun dance record. And now, but I'm really having a lot of FOMO that this just happened. This show was just a few months ago right here at Nightclub 101.
I'm super mad at myself. I really wish I was there. Yeah. And like, so I'll admit, like, for me, on paper, this stuff sounds a little bit too much like a gimmick for my taste. And it does not feel that way in execution. Like, I love the album. I'm excited. Like, the video of the live show looked really, really magnetic. Like, I wasn't like, oh my God, like, it's all about the visuals. Like, no, it looked really fun. And the songs are really good. The big thing for me is it really brings me back to the sort of, like, I'm really glad I was personally hearing a lot of Montreal. So it felt very validating to hear her actually cite that band, especially because like kind of a deep cut to cite in 2025. Like, you know, Bjork and Kate Bush, that gets cited a lot, even Animal Collective, but like Of Montreal, I don't see it cited as much these days. But anyway, this is all to say that like it brought me back to the era when sort of like indie synth pop was kind of noticeably weirder and different than like pop. You know what I mean? Like I feel like now a lot of the radio pop and the sort of critically acclaimed more alternative pop don't always sound that different. And I was like, this is like bringing me back to when like Of Montreal was doing pop stuff and Animal Collective was doing pop stuff, and like even like MGMT or Passion Pit sort of, where it's like this really bubbly synthy pop, but you just like, it just feels weirder. Like it's just not, you know, what you're hearing on the radio. It's not Z100. And it reminds me of that. And I think she does such a good job. The songs are so catchy. They are funny in a way that like doesn't wear off. Like I think sometimes when something is funny, it kind of quickly gets old. And I just feel like her sense of humor, like it has a lot of replay value, and that's really good, I think.
Yeah, I don't know. To go back to the dancey part of it, I don't know if it's just because one of their best songs is named Haha, but I'd also say Roll If You Like, the Charlotte Adiggory and Bolus whatever Peace album from 2022. It brought me back to that place. Another like really artsy synth pop, fun, dancey, wild show as well. And which, by the way, I heard they have another album coming soon. I heard that on our own Soulwax interview on the BV Interview podcast, because it's on their label. But yeah, so that's where I also went with this.
Yeah. Highly recommend if, like me, you are like, what is this Gelli Haha person?
Good one.
So next up is a category that we've hinted at, and that is the Cameron Winter and Geese combo. Why don't you tell us a little background here, Dave? Tell us what we're about to talk about.
Well, I think as everybody predicted, Geese and Wednesday are indie rock's big winners this year. But also Geese singer Cameron Winter's December 2024 solo album is appearing on a lot of lists as its own entry. In fact, Cameron Winter's album is number 3 on Pitchfork. Mm-hmm. Is that right? Which is actually ahead of Geese.
Geese was 7.
Geese is right. So that means Cameron Winter and Geese both in the top 10 of Pitchfork this year. But this is happening on a lot of lists. Cameron Winter, I mean, everyone, we've talked about this story before. Cameron Winter's album dropped at the end of 2024. Geese wasn't taken as seriously at the time. Most people like barely noticed this album came out, but then came back from holiday and January, it was like everyone was raving about this Cameron Winter album. Nobody had it on their well, I shouldn't say nobody, but probably almost nobody had it on their 2024 list. So people are doing catch up now.
Yeah. And it is interesting because, like you said, like I think the Cameron Winter album getting the kind of buzz it got was kind of like, at first it felt like, oh, maybe I don't like Geese, but I like Cameron solo. And then the new Geese record came out and kind of like felt like it quickly took over, and anybody who had been doubting Geese just seemed to like, well, that's not true. But a lot of people that had previously been doubting Geese kind of jumped into like, oh, this band's incredible. And I'm not surprised that Geese's album Getting Killed came in higher on most lists than Cameron. And most lists that had both, the Geese came in higher, except for Pitchfork, like you said. But on pretty much all the other lists that it was on, both the Geese album was higher. Also worth saying that I thought it was interesting for Pitchfork to have 2 of their top 10 slots go to the same person, but not a first. When Panda Bear topped their 2007 list with Person Pitch, Animal Collective came in at number 6 with Strawberry Jam. So some echoes of that.
Fun fact, Panda Bear is back in 2025 again on
a lot
Pitchfork's
of lists. He's a year-end list regular again this year.
Yeah,
with
which
an
is
album that features
amazing.
Cindy Lee, and I also love that record. One of my favorites.
Wow.
But yeah, I mean, I think I don't know. Do you have more to say? I think
Well, we keep connecting stuff. Yeah, I do. I don't have more like to say specifically about Cameron, but this theme of a 2024 album showing up on the 2025 list, not just a 2024 album, but a 2024 album by a solo artist who also has an acclaimed 2025 album. Cameron and Geese are not the only example. I think a little less noticed is Sharp Pins, who is an artist really good at making like psychedelic power and jangle pop, and is the project of Kai Slater from the Chicago Matador sign band Lifeguard. He has been getting attention for two great albums this year, except technically one of those came out last year. That one is Radio DDR. It got Best New Music from Pitchfork in March of this year, and it's number 50 on their Best of 2025 list. But that same album was actually on Paste's Best of 2024 list. How did that happen? The album did actually come out in 2024, but Sharp Pins re-released it this year with, I think, 3 more tracks. So now it reads as a 2025 release on places. Like if you go to Bandcamp, it's a 2025 release. But if you go to Rate Your Music and Paste's 2024 list, it's a 2024 release. And to make it even more confusing, Sharp Pins, like I said, meanwhile released another album this year called Balloon, 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 also great, and just got an 8 on Pitchfork. Paste, meanwhile, put that one on their 2025
Paste
list.
always ahead of the curve on Sharp Pins.
Ahead of the curve on Sharp Pins, yep. So you've got Sharp Pins and Lifeguard, which, by the way, Lifeguard, like I said, also released an album this year, and now the Lifeguard album didn't make Pitchfork or Geese's list, but it did get 21st best album of the year on Rolling Stone's big list of 100. So that's pretty impressive. But that's actually not. Well, those are the only examples of the 2024 thing, but it does seem to be a big theme of the solo artist, the acclaimed band with the now acclaimed solo artist as well. You mentioned Animal Collective and Panda Bear having the same year, and like we said, Animal Collective is back and with an album that I love. The fun fact that Cindy Lee is also on that one. Oh yeah, sorry, the Panda Bear's back. But let's not forget that the maker of one of 2024's best album, This Is Lorelei, is also a member of one of 2025's list-making bands, Water From Your Eyes. And that the song Dancing in the Club, which was from that 2024 This Is Lorelei album, was re-recorded with MJ Lenderman for a version that is now showing up everywhere on 2025 best song lists, including Pitchfork and number 2 on Rolling Stone's just released best song list.
And perhaps most excitingly, my number 3 most streamed song of the year, according to my Wrapped.
Oh, damn. There you go. This also means, I'm going to keep this going, that Wednesday member MJ Lenderman himself, after dominating 2024 lists with his own album, Manning Fireworks, is again dominating lists with 4 different projects this year. The just mentioned This Is Lorelei song showing up on song lists. The Wednesday album, which is, of course, dominating album lists, but also the song from that album, Townies, just showed up as number 1 on both Stereogum and Line of Best Fits song lists, much to the dismay of Elderberry Wine Stan Andrew talking to me right now.
I thought that for sure was the one.
But it doesn't end there. MJ Lenderman's new band Snowcaps, the surprise new project with Allison and Katie Crutchfield, is also showing up on end of year lists this year. And last but not least, well, maybe least, I don't know, him and Katie both guests on the new Mavis Staples album, which I have not listened to yet. Have you?
No.
But so far has somewhat predictably also shown up on many lists, probably more than Snowcaps. You've got that new Mavis Staples album on Mojo, Uncut, Rolling Stone, BBC Radio 6, and Louder Than War so far. So yes, MJ Lenderman, 4 different projects.
It's been fun and funny to watch like MJ Lenderman and Wednesday's sort of like trade. Like it was like Wednesday's previous record was everywhere. And then it was like MJ's solo record was everywhere, and now it's like back to the Wednesday year. And I think similar thing happening with This Is Lorelei and Water From Your Eyes. Yeah, really interesting. Speaking of songs from the indie rock leaders of the year that I thought would be different, Taxes by Geese is the one that's dominating on the list. I thought Cobra was for sure the best song. Maybe even Trinidad, though, which I think you told me this off air, but I think Trinidad was your most played song of the year.
Yeah, but wait, it's not. It's track 1 on the album, right? I think that just
I'm just saying it was
because it's track 1. Yes, it was. According, supposedly.
I just didn't think Taxes
at least
is the
on
one,
that,
but
on that
I guess Taxes
version
is the
of
one.
The one. Maybe, yeah. I haven't. I never. I'm not.
You're not
like
as much of a track guy.
I'm such. Yeah, I'm like the album guy, and sometimes the songs that are just on the album I listen to end up coming.
Like I would say Elderberry Wine is my favorite song of 2025. Cobra by Geese, probably number 2. So to feel that strongly, and then the lists come out and they're like, you've got the wrong picks from both bands. I'm like, wow, okay. We never do a song list, but if we did, I'd be submitting those.
Okay, just one more full circle fun fact, since we're like connecting everything right now. There was also that GQ. I don't know. Was the GQ article about MJ Lenderman, or was it about Cameron Winter? It was about one of them.
I think they both did GQ features.
All right.
It was a Geese feature and an MJ Lenderman feature, but it was in the Geese feature that MJ Lenderman was interviewed about getting into Cameron Winter and then Geese.
Oh yeah, and then hanging out with him as well. So all right, that
right. I mean, there's definitely a lot of MJ Lenderman, Cameron Winter, like talk, like they get brought up by the same people on tweets and stuff. That'd be a great tour, I think. Geese and MJ Lenderman. Geese and Wednesday would be a great tour too.
MSG,
honestly, maybe Wednesday though, not as big as the critic list would have you think. I mean, they were way lower down on that Bonnaroo poster than I would have predicted, which is
very true. Right, like Geese was significantly higher, significantly bigger.
We were not surprised when we saw on the Indie Heads Reddit this week that Geese are being looked at by major labels allegedly. Not shocking at all. In fact, seems like the first time in a while that a major label is probably smart to go after a rising indie rock band. But it would surprise me if they were going after Wednesday, sadly.
Were you surprised that the Strokes were billed above Geese on the Bonnaroo lineup? Just kidding.
All right, next topic.
All right.
Heavy music, including metal and hardcore, and where it stands on lists this year.
Okay. We previewed that like black metal is having a moment.
I said it was the most. I don't know the word. There was the most widespread excitement around black metal, or at least U.S. black metal, than there has been in years. And I think this season kind of validates that point.
And it definitely validates that the two bands that you made that point with, which is that Deaf Heaven and Agriculture are this year's like big winners for metal. With like, we're not talking about metal lists, mostly non-metal lists. They're each, so far as of this recording, have showed up on 6 lists each.
Six major lists that we've seen.
6 major lists each. Right.
Go ahead.
Yeah. So, and in a year where there's like almost no other metal on the lists, not counting Decibel, which is all metal, or any a lot of the like more mainstream leaning metal sites haven't released their lists yet, and there'll be a lot more Deaf Heaven on those, and obviously a lot more metal on those. But yeah, we're not really talking about that.
Yeah, we're talking about like Deaf Heaven. Deaf Heaven came in at number 2 on Treble, and in the top 10 for Consequence and Exclaim, and Decibel for that matter. Also on Stereogum and Glide's list. Agriculture, also top 10 on Treble, top 10 on The Quietest. That was really cool, I thought. Also on Stereogum, Exclaim, Paste, and again, Decibel.
It's not just obvious that both of those would be on Decibel either, because of all the kind of like politics of metal and infighting and what's okay and not, and Decibel and Agriculture kind of being, there's going to be certain kind of metal site that Agriculture is not mainstream enough for, and then there's going to be a certain kind of metal site that Agriculture is too
or just
for,
too
maybe
like too like false metal for.
Right. Yeah, whatever. However false metal is defined.
And Def Heaven, of
Exactly.
course,
So
have got the false metal allegations the entire time they've been a band. So to see them in the top 10 on
exactly. So
Decibel in 2025, and they were getting these allegations in 2013, you know, kind of. I mean,
yeah.
they must feel like, okay, clearly, like, you know, we drowned out those loud haters, but yeah, definitely, it's a tough conundrum to be a band like Def Heaven and Agriculture, where you're not big enough for the lists that are going to be dominated by Ghost and Sleep Token, but you're like Def Heaven might be, but like, you know, like, yeah, and then like you said, like, to not true enough, true with a V, for the lists that are going to have, like, you know, Ancient Death.
But it's a nice bonus though that they get the lists that have no other metal.
And I
so
think they
that's
deserve.
something.
They, you know, like, I to me, like, I think. I mean, Def Heaven, I don't need to talk about their crossover appeal if you like, it's well documented. But Agriculture, I think, really are kind of like, you know, next up in a way for that. Like this album really, like we said on that episode, we talked about this. It really strikes me as like, it could be your one metal record or two with Def Heaven that you kind of get into if you're not like a big metal listener or one at all, or like, you know, or curious about it. Like, it's got the right amount of crossover appeal while still remaining like very much an aggressive extreme metal record.
Much less extreme is the kind of second place metal album, which has appeared on a few lists, which is Mesa, who are like a doom and gothic clean vocal band who I've actually always loved. And so when I saw the new album was getting so much love all year, I've been listening to it a lot. It wasn't like instant. I didn't get it as much. I'm like, I like it, but when an album is on the top of everything, you know, you're seeing it as like, I'm like, wait, what am I missing? Why am I not on that level with it? So then I tend to force these things by listening it over and over and over till I finally, and it's kind of been hitting me lately. I get it. But yeah, you could argue some people might ask, how is this even metal? Yeah. All right. I'm going to say, you just said one of the songs sounds like Adele.
Yeah. Yep. And then Chat Pile and Hayden Pedagogue's collaborative record was on both treble and stereogum. Also worth noting that we also always love Treble's metal list, which I think is like kind of as interesting from a metal standpoint as Decibel's only list. And similar to Brooklyn Vegan, Treble always have some metal on their main list and then a longer list of just metal. And in addition to Def Heaven, Agriculture, Mesa, and that Chat Pile Hayden Pedagogue record, their main list also has the Sumac and More Mother record. So,
yeah, which, you know, another crossover. More Mother, obviously not a metal artist, but collaborates
yeah, and even the
with
Chat
them.
Pile record, like I would not primarily call that metal, but
No, I don't consider it metal. But Chat Pile are one of those bands. I feel like we went through this last year too. We're like, we're not going to call you metal all year, but then when we're making a metal list, we're like, yeah, I guess we should put you're metal.
It's a
sure
genre, right? Meanwhile, as for hardcore and the Turnstile Effect, something that you kind of previewed or foreshadowed in the last episode, not much besides Turnstile themselves. Turnstile are, as predicted, pretty big winners this year. They're on at least 10 major lists, including Exclaim, Rough Trade, Consequence, Stereogum, Rolling Stone, Line of Best Fit, Treble, Uncut Glide, and OOR. Stereogum, who we love their hardcore coverage. Shout out Tom Bryan. Also, I know our friend Eli contributes to them, and Chris writes about hardcore too, but Danielle. But like, Stereogum has Scarab on their list, and the hardcore Scarab. Sorry, the hardcore adjacent military gun. Otherwise, not seeing much hardcore on lists unless you count the Armed. Drain's new album, Is Your Friend, was on a 0 list that I've seen. I think they made maybe like one of the big hard rock lists, like was it Loudwire or something? But none of the like main like sort of like multi-genre publications have had Drain. I thought that could kind of be this year's like heavier than Turnstile hardcore record that did get some love, but nope. And I mean, Turnstile really like, again, we talked enough about whether or not they are even hardcore at this point, which I'll always say yes, but I will also, of course, acknowledge that musically, most of the new record is not what most people think of when they think of hardcore. But they've basically...
And there's a certain amount of people listening to us right now screaming at their whatever you're listening to this on, that's not even a hardcore band.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
Well, again, we have that episode. Go listen to that episode. Turnstile at this point, though, have really graduated to rock giant. The other year's rock giants, I think Deftones and Hayley Williams. Hayley's new album not being quite as heavy, but she is on the Turnstile record. She played live with both Turnstile and Deftones this year. So like those three kind of are lumped in my brain, and they're all nominated for Grammys. And, Deftones are fresh off an arena tour. Turnstile, as we just mentioned, they're now headlining festivals. Paramore's last tour was all arenas and headlining festivals. So these are like, these are kind of the real like rock giants, like sort of like the new generation of like almost classic rock, it seems. That Turnstile is maybe a bit too new for that. That are also getting that critical love, deservedly, obviously, in my opinion. I say obviously because obviously I like all the three records, as listeners of this podcast already know. Deftones were on Vulture, Treble, Consequence, Exclaim, Stereogum, Line of Best Fit, Rolling Stone, and BB Radio 6. Hayley Williams was on the New Yorker, Line of Best Fit, Exclaim, Rolling Stone, Rough Trade, The 45 Pace, Loud and Quiet, Stereogum, and Consequence. And old news at this point, but still interesting to point out that both Deftones and Paramore were ignored by so many of these exact types of lists during their peak popularities. So it is cool to see them officially becoming like these sort of like legendary, acclaimed, like rock veterans that are continuing to make some of the best music of their careers. But notably, Deftones, Turnstile, and Hayley Williams are all not on Pitchfork's best rock albums of 2025. Or their main list, but not even the rock one. Not even the rock
Not even the rock list.
Now, we won't get too into Cameron Winter coming in at number 3 on Pitchfork's main list and only 16 on their rock list, behind a bunch of albums that didn't even make the main list. Again, we don't fully know what goes into this stuff. But I will say Pitchfork's rock list was very cool and a place to find very cool stuff like First Day Back, the like new generation, like 90s style Midwest emo revival band that I don't even think, did they even get reviewed on Pitchfork? Like that was really cool to see them at number 3. Algernon Cadwallader, same genre, big comeback this year. Horse Girl, the aforementioned Sharp Pins, They Are Gutting a Body of Water, Lambrini Girls, Suede. A lot of cool stuff made that list that could have otherwise gotten overlooked. So
definitely.
Otherwise, a few punk bands I saw on lists like would have been like Lambrini Girls, Die Spitz, Viagra Boys, the Armed we mentioned. Exclaim, like I said, very cool. Very having that Canada love with the Canadian screamo band Emma Goldman. But yeah, not as much metal, punk, and hardcore on those main lists this year as some other years, but not a bad year at all for that stuff. A very good year for it. So
Tsunami still made it on Bonnaroo, though.
Tsunami still made it on Bonnaroo. All right, last topic.
Our if I think we've actually done like 10 topics, but
maybe
our
but
number
we're calling
5
it 5 for some reason.
Our number 5, glaring, interesting. Our number 5 topic is glaring and interesting omissions on this year's end of year list, and we're going to open that up with Lily Allen, which I kind of nominated as a glaring omission, even though she is on at least 6 lists so far. I thought she'd be on way more.
And also, like, the list, I won't name names, but the list that she isn't on, I think, was surprising. Like, you know what I mean? Like, she made a handful of lists, but there are also a handful that she didn't make that I would have expected her to be on. I'll say. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah. We thought that album was kind of really good.
Not just really good.
And also...
but
really loved.
Like one of, to me, that album was kind of like one of the stories of the year. Like I feel like, okay.
Tell us that story.
So I think one of the reasons that the album is well, I think a reason why maybe it's overlooked, but also maybe why it hit so hard, landed so noticeably, and well, is it was sort of like it was only announced days before it came out. No singles were released from it prior, and nothing about the album's backstory was revealed prior. So it was her first album in a while.
Partially to avoid lawsuits that may have stopped it from coming out.
So I think a lot of us were surprised when the album came out, and it's like this extremely, like, no mincing words, really, really just brutally honest record about Lily's divorce from David Harbour, the actor who's on Stranger Things.
Which conveniently, or maybe that's not the right word, then premiered the new long-awaited new season just
Definitely
like a
not
month
the word.
later.
But yeah, also
Inconveniently.
and
I mean, it was good press for the show.
I
All
guess
press
so. And the
good
album is
press.
full of, I mean, you know, like basically like cheating accusations and all this really, really just stuff that's really deeply personal and sounds awful to have gone through. So, you know, the album is heavy because of all this stuff being talked about on it. But on top of that, it's also really catchy. I remember that Lily had been a really big fan of Charlie XCX's Brat when it came out. I wish I had this quote in front of me, but she definitely praised it as like being really special for pop music. And I think this album sounds clearly influenced by Brat, especially songs like I'm forgetting the title, but the one about like where Charlie's trying to decide if she should have a baby, like the really like vulnerable moments on Brad. It feels like a full album of music like that, but still like distinctly Lily Allen. So it's like the influence is obvious, but also like still sounds like like an artist who is beloved and has a distinct sound of her own. And so it's like this super, super catchy record that I want to keep listening to over and over about these like really dark personal times. And it was a slow burn success because, again, it came out and nobody would like, everybody just kind of clicked play and was like, whoa, this is the album. And like, it got way bigger over time. Like, it wasn't this instant thing. And like, the sort of, a lot of reviews were belated. We didn't even review it on Brooklyn Vegan. And I think part of that is because I was caught off guard. And by the time I kind of was ready to realize I loved it, it was the moment kind of felt like it passed. And it's a bummer that it does feel that like way with publishing reviews. But anyway, yeah, so it just, to me, this kind of felt like one of the just like the biggest album stories of the year. And like, it just, I felt like it was going to be dominating on lists and not really. But the 45 put her at number one. So I think the fact that anybody would put her at number one doesn't surprise me at all. Like, it feels like an album that could easily be someone's favorite. And I think when an album could be a publication's number one and then not show up at all on a bunch of others, like, that's always interesting, because it's like here's an album that one group of music critics could call the absolute best of the year, and another could say it's not even the 50th best.
Which was also Ribbon Skirt,
but that felt much more niche. Yeah,
that's different. I know.
The popularity of Lily Allen adds to. And the next one we'll say is, you go ahead before we move on. But the next artist we're going to bring up is also the popularity factor, I think, weighs in.
Just one other exciting thing about Lily Allen for me is that, like many that listened to primarily indie and alternative music back in 2006, I loved her debut album, All Right Still, which was a pop album, but it was just one of those albums which kind of dominated the indie conversation. And, you know, we covered, and I went a lot back in 2006. I've seen Lily many times, but then it kind of fell off with Lily. I don't even remember much about her 1, 2, 3 albums that came after that, to be totally honest. I'm sure I at least tried to get into each of them, but this one really has just stuck out to me as, oh, whoa, like Lily Allen excitement again. And I feel like I said this about almost a similar story about another artist recently, but that's it. That's my final words on that.
And yeah, I mean, I think what you said is like probably a shared experience with a lot of people. I mean, our second record, I think, had some big hits too that are, to me, like, feel as nostalgic as the first album's hits. But, you know, a lot of people fell off with her. A lot of the later records were just not received as well. And to me, this is probably my favorite Lily Allen record. It's the biggest phase I've ever had with a Lily Allen record, I think. So, but the next one is Tyler, the Creator's Don't Tap the Glass, which I've only seen on 3 lists: Stereogum, Exclaim, and Consequence. And similar to Lily Allen, Tyler, like, he's more popular than ever, which is different than Lily Allen. She's kind of gone down in popularity. But, you know, he has always had that balance of like a popular artist and a critically acclaimed artist. His last record, Chromacopia, was on a lot more lists. And I think this one being shorter and coming out in the middle of the album cycle for the last one and being a surprise release in the middle of a tour, like, probably worked against it. But I also kind of thought that the album went on to transcend that, and it didn't seem like this leftovers thing, that like it really did seem like it was as much of a force as Tyler's last few records. And certainly one of my favorite albums of the year. I thought it'd be on a lot more lists, but that one stuck out to me.
Yeah, and we haven't seen any of the big rap lists yet, we should mention. So, like, you know, I'm sure Tyler will be on Complex and
Vibe, Double
maybe
XL.
OK Player,
Yeah.
Vibe. Right. These lists haven't dropped yet. I guess they're not as like in a rush to beat. But that's it. Tyler, yeah, shot on not many lists. Another one, which I don't think we have to talk about much, but given all of the hype and excitement coming out of Ethel Cain's last album previous to this year, and what a huge artist Ethel seemed to be, it was a little surprising to see neither of Ethel's albums that came out this year really appearing on a lot of lists yet. The first one, not surprising, the ambient one, that didn't really feel like it would be on lists, although it did appear on 1 or 2, I think. But the newer one, Willoughby Tucker, I'll Always Love You, which is more of a traditional, what would you call it?
More of a pop album, I guess.
More of a pop album. Yeah. Not too many lists.
Yeah.
Actually, maybe even on the ambient. I guess it's surprising the pop one wasn't on more lists, and surprising the ambient one made as many lists as it did.
It made the quietest, which was cool, because they were like recognizing that it was legit at the form, you know, that it was doing. Like,
right.
So that was cool. But yeah, I agree. I thought Ethel Cain was going to be like the anticipation for new Ethel Cain in the beginning of the year was like, it was drowning out a lot of other music. And then here we are, and she's not really having a big year-endless season.
Yeah. And so then another thing is like, whatever, we're talking about indie rock bands of the year, Wednesday, Geese, but like kind of old reliables. People don't seem to feel the pressure to put some of these on lists. We're not seeing the Beths on any list. Destroyer, even Black Country New Road, who is, just this kind of indie rock. Nico Case. I mean, some of these appeared on Pitchfork's rock list, but
yeah. I mean, I think outside of Geese and Wednesday for indie rock, it was like nothing feels like a glaring omission, kind of. Like, you could have Destroyer or you could not. You could have Alex G or you could not. Like, it almost seems like it wouldn't be like this hot take, whereas like in the past there were like probably like 20 to 30 indie rock records, or at least indie rock adjacent records, that you kind of knew you're going to see like everywhere.
Yeah. And so then there are some lists with hot takes, because it was like, I think it was Mojo that did not have Wednesday, which was kind of surprising, especially given the vibe of like the rock. They were very rock first,
and like specifically sort of a classic rock type of influence, and Wednesday sound that way. Like,
given a band that would make top 10 Rolling Stone to not even make like Mojo's 100 or however many they have.
I agree.
So stay tuned to see what indie rock is on Brooklyn Vegan's end of year list,
and
coming
metal
soon.
and hardcore.
And and every other genre we just talked about. And you know what? Email us at bvweekly@gmail.com and tell us what your favorite album of the year is. But meanwhile, there's some new albums out today as well. The year is not over.
Yeah. So I'm I am curious, you kind of mentioned at the start of the episode, like December records that make lists because people have advances versus we wonder if people are just sort of like kind of making the new cutoff point, like December through November is the new sort of year. Like we just are we moving towards a model where we expect December 2025 records to be on 2026 lists? But there's 3 albums out today that I want to bring it some attention to that I have not seen on any list, and they weren't out yet, and maybe that's why. But one that I think has a lot of year-end list potential, a lot of wide appeal, very, very good, highly anticipated, is Redveil's new album, Sankofa. It's his first since his breakthrough album, Learn to Swim, in April of 2022. So almost 4 years ago, which is like an eternity for rap. And basically redveil is like he really does it all. He raps, he sings, he handles production and instrumentation. On this record he brought in live musicians too, so it's like this really rich, melodic, lush rap album with live instruments, and it like touches on jazz and soul and noisy glitch hop, and he has like very hard bars but also like very melodic vocal harmonies. And it kind of brings me back to the days of records like Kendrick Lamar's Good Kid, Mad City, Chance the Rapper's acid rap, kind of the more melodic Tyler and Earl stuff, even some My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy. So really, really good if you crave that kind of rap. The other 2 albums are actually also rap albums, but very, very different. One of them is the self-titled debut album from Hayward X Dalek, which is the collaborative project of This Heat drummer Charles Hayward and MC Dalek of the industrial rap group Dalek. And kind of sounds exactly like you might think it would if you know This Heat and Dalek, which is like this, it's like this noisy, like dark ambience, kind of like just out there experimental, haunting music. And then out of nowhere, Dalek will pop up and just start rapping about how terrible the world is. And the whole thing is absolutely bleak and ominous, even in the context of experimental rap. You don't hear a lot of records this just dark. And then De Niro Ferrar, who was one of the kind of buzzed about rappers in the early 2010s cloud rap era, like he was kind of associated with like Denzel Curry and stuff. He has not really been talked about as much in the recent years as he was back like a decade ago, but he's kind of quietly been making a pretty prolific comeback this year. He has 3 albums out in 2025, and his third one out now, out this week, Raw Materials, was entirely produced by Child Actor, who he worked with back in the day on some of his breakthrough records. And he's doing like a much different kind of thing now. He's kind of more like got like a calmer jazz rap, chipmunk soul vibe going on. His voice sounds calmer than it did back then. And it's very, very cool stuff. Not to be missed in the shuffle of year-end lists. I review all those records and notable releases on BrooklynVegan.com, and Bill does some reviews in Indie Basement, including the new Melodies Echo Chamber, Teed, and the Baxter Dury Remix EP. So as always, check out notable releases in Indie Basement on BrooklynVegan.com for all of our new album reviews. And we got some new songs this week, some new albums to look forward to, including a band I'm a huge fan of, Tiger's Jaw. Their new album, Lost on You, is coming in 2026. The new single, Head is Like a Sinking Stone, sounds like classic Tiger's Jaw. And Brooklyn Vegan has an exclusive blue and green swirl vinyl variant up for pre-order at shop.brooklynvegan.com. So go check that out. Well, if you're into Tiger's Jaw, you might want to know we also have the upcoming Joyce Manor record in there, an exclusive variant of that, and a Modern Baseball reissue. So excited for new Tiger's Jaw. Big fan. Flea from the Chili Peppers has a jazz album on the way. There's a 7-minute single out now. I thought it was pretty cool stuff to hear. Voxtrot, who have been making a comeback, are now putting out their first album in 19 years. They're also going on tour again. The album's called Dreamers in Exile, and its single Fighting Back is extremely nostalgia-inducing. Took me right back to the exciting era of Voxtrot's rise, which I know, Dave, you were really also a big fan of that era of Voxtrot.
Yes, and I've seen them play live songs now, I think 3 years in a row, every year at South by Southwest, which is in their, well, I don't know if they all live still there, but Austin being their hometown.
So yeah,
they've been kind of like teasing the fact that they'd be on their coming back with new songs. I'm glad they are.
Exciting stuff. Speaking of 7-minute jazz songs, Floating Points, who kind of bounces between being a jazz musician and an electronic musician, looks like he might be going back to the jazz side with Corner of My Eye, new single, which is very jazzy and big fan of it. I mean, hey, full circle, right? I mentioned Pharoah Sanders at the start of the episode. Pharoah Sanders collaborator Floating Points, maybe going jazz again. So I hope so. Speaking of electronic music, Aphex Twin dropped two new tracks on SoundCloud. Any Aphex Twin drop, it's a reason to be excited. And I'll end this segment by continuing my hype for the new Ratboys album. Can't recommend it enough. The third single is out this week. It's called What's Right, and it is 3 for 3. I cannot wait for this album. It's especially if Wednesday is in your top 10, like it is for seemingly everybody. I consider Ratboys to be a pretty similar band, but with, of course, a vibe of their own. And I'm, looking forward to 2026 being a really big year for Ratboys.
All right, wrap this up with some quick news. As Gelli Haha will probably be happy to learn, Björk, who, by the way, was played in this week's episode of Horrible Show Down Cemetery Road on Apple, which for some reason I continue to keep watching. It's like the same people or it's related to Slow Horses, same author or something. So I started watching it. Slow Horses, really awesome show. Anyway, Björk was in the episode last night, and Tricky was in a previous episode. So that's been a highlight of that show. But who were we talking about again?
I'm like, wait,
Björk
where are we going with this?
Confirmed. Björk has confirmed that she has a new album on the way, her first since 2022. The 1975 say that they have 2 new albums in the work, including one called Dogs. Take that, Björk. Just one album. Come on. A week after Zach Bryan announced a tour with a man of the hour, MJ Lenderman, Tyler Childers, another huge country artist who we love, has announced a tour with MJ's band Wednesday. Although, as we know, MJ is not currently touring with Wednesday, so he will not personally be opening both for Tyler and Zach, at least unless they change that rule. FKA Twigs, who made one of our favorite albums of the year, as we said earlier, announced her biggest tour yet, including her Madison Square Garden debut and other big venues. Rosalía, who also made one of this year's best albums, also announced a massive tour that also includes her Madison Square Garden debut. And speaking of bands who are playing Madison Square Garden and who, I mean, in this case, definitely their end of year run is coming up. Definitely not their debut, probably like their 100th time playing Madison Square Garden. Phish also just announced that they will as well be returning to the Sphere in Las Vegas in 2026. I am sure that's a great place to see Phish if you love Phish. And many Phish fans are probably also fans of the band King Gizzard and the Lizard Wizard, who have announced their annual return to New York City's Forest Hill Stadium, where they'll be playing 3 shows in 2026. Their only U.S. shows, in addition to their own just announced Field of Vision Festival in Colorado that same month, which has a very cool lineup, including Colorado's Blood Incantation, Die Spitz, Folk Bitch Trio, Upchuck, and more. Thank you again for listening to BV Weekly. Please like and subscribe wherever you listen. Email us at bvweekly@gmail.com if you want to, and hit up our shop at shop.brooklynvegan.com. We will talk to you next week.
Thanks for tuning in. Dave and I will be back every Friday morning with new episodes of BV Weekly. And in between the episodes, you can always get much more from us at brooklynvegan.com, on all of our social media, including Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, TikTok. You can pick up records from us at shop.brooklynvegan.com. And if you like what you hear, tell your friends about us, subscribe to the show, give us a good rating. All that little stuff goes a really long way. It really helps us a lot, and we really appreciate it. So until then, thank you again, and see you next time.